thank you for coming. We've got our funding focus session on the Boardmasters Foundation. So, Boardmasters, for anyone who doesn't know, it's a huge event. The UK's biggest surf and music festival, held annually in Newquay, Cornwall. It's a 5-day event which celebrates surf culture, showcases musical talent, multiple stages, tens of thousands of visitors each year. And with that, of course, comes different money flow. And so the Boardmasters team hence created the Boardmasters Foundation, and that was established to be able to then give back to the local communities that then host the festival. Actually placing this festival in Newquay, we want to be able to give back to the community. It promotes initiatives that promote culture and community across Cornwall. It's got a particular focus, of course, on the locations immediately surrounding that festival site, but it does support all of Cornwall too. It's been raising money for good causes since 2002, which is very similar to when Cornwall Community Foundation started, but officially the Boardmasters Foundation was established in 2017 in that need to give back to the heart of the festival, which is the community. It grows on its annual fundraising and charitable donations year on year, and this year and onwards they are now collaborating with us as Cornwall Community Foundation, and hope by joining forces, actually we're the largest grant maker in Cornwall, and we know lots of different community groups and have access to perhaps more far-reaching community groups than the Boardmasters Foundation's been able to access themselves. So we're taking it on, and it'll be an even new opportunity for CCF. Dates-wise then, actually it's not open at the moment. I think it'd be a bit silly to open it just before Christmas. We're all gearing up to that time. So actually in January, February, it'll be opening up. And hopefully if you're signed up to our newsletter, that will be a really good way to find that exact date at the moment. I'll send you a link at that after this. In March time, then the application process will close and it will get assessed. And then in April, around Easter time, so that early April 2026 would be when you would get your verdict. The grant's value is lowest 200 up to around 3,000. So again, those smaller grants that we provide, but can go a very long way. So, main point, what is the objective? What do they want to see from this fund? So, widely, it wants to support organisations, charities and projects to create county-wide impact, increase sentiment awareness in the regional area, inspire the community's next generation by supporting meaningful, scalable, long-lasting initiatives. Which is a really good point. Longevity is always a key point, and how it would perhaps go beyond that initial period that you have funding for. Amplifying your work, maybe creating a halo fundraising effect, and supporting the Boardmasters brand pillars. So they've got 2 pillars that they have sort of that key focus on, and it's a good sort of vein to move forward with. That first one is culture. So actually all the culture that the Boardmasters Festival and the Boardmasters Foundation thrives on. So it might be organisations that are involved promoting surfing, of course, that's the main part, I suppose, of Boardmasters, but also that music, creativity, education, or something around Cornish culture, heritage. So that's one pillar. Fantastic if you think we fit that culture, but there's also the second, which is far more wide reaching as well. So the key pillar of focus 2 is actually that community. So we've got culture and community. Within that, the community might be a preference towards that immediate festival vicinity. So of course, we've got our central Newquay, Porth, Whipsidery, I cannot pronounce all of those, Watergate Bay, Fistral. So sort of that surrounding immediate area, those close bays around the festival. But also organisations within the county of Cornwall, so you can be within the further support that support diversity and inclusion. So for example, that could be wider accessibility, gender equality, LGBTQ+, working with those groups or people of colour. So actually supporting more diversity, more accessible inclusion. And then final point, it might be throughout Cornwall, but actually improving and raising awareness of societal issues. So that could be raising awareness of homelessness, of mental health, of negative environmental impact. So actually that's quite wide, really. Raising awareness of mental health, that could be you have a group for people's mental health. And in doing that, you are promoting the knowledge of mental health and wellbeing. So it's actually quite far reaching. Of course, it's got its key pillars, but I think it's probably wider than you initially thought. Previous recipients, there's been so many, you can imagine 2002, officially 2017, there's plenty. A lot of these we have supported in the past, but there's probably far more that they could be reaching, hence working with CCF. A couple of examples here. Suppose you can see the WAVE project received some funding towards their surf therapy sessions. You can see here that it went to Newquay, but it also went across Cornwall because they work throughout the county. Newquay Food Bank, again, quite specific to Newquay, but it allowed support in the region of 400 households over a 3-month period. And Clear Support, again, was in Newquay. But you can also see there that that fit the community aspect rather than, I suppose, the culture side of it. So there's lots of strings to the bows and lots of people that they can help. But I suppose a bit more on CCF, if there is anyone that isn't as familiar with how our process works, we can support a variety of groups, but to do that, you need some recognised documents. So you will need a recognised governing documents, that would be a constitution, articles of association, just a document to show your group's rules. And we do ask for a minimum of 3 unrelated members, so that be trustees, committee members, that all your details are registered, whether that's charity commissions for charities, companies house for CICs, or if the details need to be registered. We do ask for a safeguarding policy. That is whether you are working with children, vulnerable adults, it's for all. And in that, we expect to see the safeguarding officer named and a contact detail for that specific designated safeguarding lead. We don't need an info@ email. A bank account in the organisation's name, which requires 2 unrelated signatories, and a bank statement dated within the last 3 months. And then within that, we only need specific documents every 3 years. So you wouldn't have to send your constitution every single time because it may not have been changed. The one that we often need is that bank statement. And we do need you to be based in Cornwall or the Isles of Scilly or benefit residents within there. And usually your project must be completed within a year. So for this case, actually, it might be, okay, here's our year's project. But that longevity element, you might talk about how it's going to continue, how you plan for that impact to continue. A few we can't, sort of whiz through this one, have a look through if any apply to you. Major ones, I suppose, are we are a charity, so we are not there to directly support something that is statutory funded. But for example, we can support schools through a PTA. We can support a parish council if they've created an association or a friends of, for example. So they're sort of our main points we can't. And they're important because Boardmasters Foundation will work with someone like us because we do have that due diligence. We do really make sure that what's coming to them is something is legitimate and viable. The process itself, I know a few of you will be familiar with it here, but it's hopefully as accessible and simple as can be. It's 1 round online application, and that application generally consists of not too much, I suppose, for you to go. What then happens, and will happen with the case of Boardmasters, is They will all get collected together. There'll be a deadline date. Sometimes they roll throughout, but this one has a deadline date. And at that deadline, they'll get gathered together. They will go to one of our assessors. We have 4 grants officers, and they're all responsible for different funds. It will get sent to them, and either they will assess it or an external assessor. And during that process, we really then pride ourselves on asking further questions, because sometimes there is nothing worse if you've not put something quite clear enough or it doesn't quite make sense, and then you get put straight in the no pile. We will always then ask those further questions, because it will get sent to a panel. And in that panel, it will often be sort of experts on that field. They might be the fund holder themselves. And we are then in place. We will create a document that has everything you've put in your form, and it has our assessor's comments. And that will be a recommendation of what we think from the info we've gathered, but ultimately it will be the panel that then makes that decision. And if we've asked the questions, we're in the best place then to be able to represent your group in the most true light. You'll be informed of your decision. Hopefully, grants received, fantastic. If not, sometimes we can try and move it around to different pots so you can gather feedback from why it may have been unsuccessful. And then after that year period, you get an end of grant report form, which is really just a chance to storytell. Tell us your story and the impact that you made, and we can create lovely case studies about it. It's not to trip you up. And submitting applications earlier is always better. It gives the assessor more chance to really detailed assess. If it all comes in on the last day, you can imagine it's quite a rush. So a look at the application form. This is slightly different because I've made different bits a bit bigger for you to see. But the first stage is always just general info about your organisation. You can see there it might be address details, contact person, type of organisation that you are. Again, if you don't feel you fit, you just put other and explain. Staff, annual income and expenditure. You can imagine that's quite important for us to gather. Often a question that we have to chase up sometimes. And most of these big worded questions are 100 words, again, to save you time, but also it's tricky getting them within that word count, so it's good to think of as you go throughout. The second part is then specifically about the project. So you'd be giving us a start date and end date. With your start date, you'd want to put it after the assessment period, so it doesn't seem like you've started that project and it's now retrospective costs. Where you will benefit, local authorities, and then one of your main questions, how will you spend this grant? And sort of describing that project, what you do with the money. And the second will be about the needs and disadvantage your project will address. A good one to look at there is we do research called Vital Signs that we do with the University of Exeter. It's got community consultations, a survey, but it's filled with stats that are very Cornwall driven need. Sometimes that can be quite hard to put into words. Actually, we're not that picture postcard Cornwall. There's a lot of need there, and it's just a good place to get some stats. And then the third part's about impact. It will not look this overwhelming when you go on. These are what will then be in the drop down menu. So I've just put those there so you can see what categories there are. And main part of that beneficiary is, don't think too deeply into it. It's a lot more for us to then be able to know where they're hitting. So you put your best fit there really. But the main part of that impact is that question there. What positive changes would this grant make? So you're looking at your impact and you're thinking about how you're going to measure your impact through it. Final parts, project budget. So breaking it down as much as you can here, staff costs, volunteer costs and such. Place to put your bank details. And a great one, are you able to proceed on a lower award? That will be a tick box and explaining why. That's always good to do, because you can imagine in a panel scenario, they've got an X amount of money, X amount of groups. You've asked for 3,000 and they have 2,800 left. Well, if you've put part funding, then you can get that. Supporting docs would put there and a declaration. And I suppose to finish up on us, generally when looking at your application, there's a few common things that will occur. Strengths would be that you've actually demonstrated you understand the need of your area and your beneficiary. How will it represent value for money? How are you going to show the impact is measurable, your project sustainable? And again, thinking about that environmental impact, that would be something worth considering when it comes to the Boardmasters Foundation's criteria. But the common areas is actually if the project doesn't fit the criteria, which is fantastic. You come to this session to see if you fit the criteria. Fab. Because you can imagine if we get ones that you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, it's not going to be the best use of your time or our time. If the budget isn't clear, that's the one that we have to come back to a lot to ask additional questions. Just being as transparent or detailed as you can. We know that things will alter as you work with the community. If the documents are missing or unclear, sometimes we get a safeguarding policy that's 10 years old and we go, we've got to go back to it. So that will just use time. And if your application leaves the assessor with too many questions, almost try and think about the questions they'll have before you've even submitted. So that is a whistle-stop tour. I've sort of done that so then you can ask me more specific questions that you have once we've finished. As I say, my role will then be fulfilled in January, February time. So for now, it's a case of contacting this email, grants@cornwallfoundation.com. That will then go to all our grants officers, and the most relevant grants officer will be able to reply to you then. If you reply to my email, you probably won't get a response over Christmas. So that would be the best place to go for support. We also are hosting a drop-in in Newquay in January. So if any of you are there local, you can have a chat with us face to face then to discover more. But it will be opening in January, February time. Specific dates, best to find out through our newsletter. Fab. Thank you.